Juggling motherhood and modern day life can be stressful and relentless, but it doesn't need to be this way. The Joy of Being podcast is the answer to maternal mental health, bringing sustainable relief and calm to hardworking mums everywhere so that you, your family and work can thrive. My name is Marina Pearson and I'm your host, transformational coach and mum who loves to interview business owners, transformational professionals and creatives to have insightful conversations about what it takes to really live a life that is thriving, fulfilling and full of joy. And as the summer holidays have finally sprung upon us, I've decided to dedicate the following weeks to picking the most popular shows to create the Stay Sane summer series to help those of you who find this time of year a bit hellish to give you your sanity back. And if you're feeling like you're going nuts and are thinking, I just need a fucking break and want a quick, sustainable fix, you're in luck, as I'm gifting an instant mum relief accelerator call worth £500 to 25 lucky hardworking mums who want some instant relief from the madness. If that is you, go to bit.ly/instant mum relief. That's bit.ly/instant mum relief, where you can book your call. You can also find the link in the show notes. And on today's episode of the Stay Sane Summer Series number 1, I decided to pick Liz Petrone's interview that we did way back when. And the reason for that was not only because it was one of the most popular downloads that we've had since launching this podcast, but also the topic. I decided to change the title of it because actually when I re-listened to it, what I really realized is that we've talked a lot about the loneliness of mothering and how it can often feel like we're the only ones going through that particular episode. And I thought it would be a very relevant topic, especially when it comes to the summer. It may look like you're going it alone, but just as a reminder that you're not, just as a reminder that you can always reach out, just as a reminder that you don't have to go it alone and that you're not on your own. And so if you're curious about Liz and what she's up to, she's a writer, she's a blogger, she's a teller of stories, believer in truth, and a mama to 4. So she knows a little bit about how to ride this motherhood wave of loneliness. And in so doing, she shares her stories on lizpetrone.com and all over the internet. She actually recently finished her book, and she can also be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I've met her in person, and she's an amazing woman and deeply gifted with her writing. So if you fancy not feeling alone so much and want to chime to the, oh my God, me too, then this is going to be a great episode for you to either re-listen to, replay to, or listen to the first time. Enjoy and stay sane. So welcome, Liz. Okay. I'm super excited to have you here today. And you know, like with life, I don't even know how I found you. I guess I Googled mom's business life and you came up, and then I got curious about what you're up to in the world, and then found your wonderful blog and your heartfelt way of looking at life and the raw and real way that you express yourself. So I'm really excited to have this raw and real conversation with you today. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for reaching out and inviting me to have this conversation. I am excited as well.
So, Liz, I'm curious about something. I'm curious about how you got started with your blog, how you got started with this whole sense of needing to express what was going on for you. Because obviously you're a mama. Yep. And yeah, so I'm just curious about how your journey started.
Well, I had, when I started writing, which was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, on the blog, and I used the term blog loosely because really it was just like me writing things on the internet and my one aunt reading them, you know, my one aunt who has faithfully read everything I've ever written and always responded to me. But at the time I had 3 young kids. I had just had my 3rd baby, and after her, I ended up with postpartum depression. For the first time, I had never had that with the other 2. So I had my 3rd child, clawed my way back out of postpartum depression. And I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk about the reality of postpartum depression, of, you know, how hard it is to have small children and try to be a working mother. Although I think it's hard whether you're a working mother or not. That just is my situation. And the thing is, I didn't have any time to talk to anybody because I had 3 young children. So I found that the words were going to come out one way or the other, and sticking them on a page on the internet seemed as good a method as any. And then slowly, people started saying, oh my gosh, me too, which is like the most amazing thing that can happen, I think, when you're in that situation, when you're in any situation where you feel alone. And so then things just kind of grew from there, because it seemed like this amazing way to connect with people when I wasn't necessarily able to, leave the house or put on pants.
Yeah, I really, it's interesting because I didn't realize that I had postpartum depression either. And it was only until after I was through it that I realized, and people, the women that I was around would start talking about it, that kind of also pointed me in the direction. They were like, I think you must have had it. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I never really realized until after the fact. And, I think how you started is so beautiful, because you're so right. It is such a lonely journey, especially because we're all in our heads, right? So
right.
We only think it's only happening to us unless we talk about it. But it's a big taboo, do you not think? Did you not find that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you say that about not really realizing you had it until after, because my presentation wasn't very classic either, or what I thought was a classic presentation of postpartum depression. So there's a lot of that dialogue, like, oh well, this can't be that, because I don't look like, they presented on TV, or I don't look like I've heard other stories of, which is part of why I think it's super important to keep talking about that kind of stuff and say, here is my experience, which may be different than your experience, which may be different from the experience of your neighbor down the street, you know what I mean? So that people realize that there are all these different ways that you can be struggling.
I don't know what it was like for you, but for me, it was very much around just being pretty exhausted all the time. I guess that's quite normal.
Oh, God.
But not being able to connect with my son, that was the most difficult part of all.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to hold him. I didn't, I was just like, I just need to sleep. I need to recuperate, but not actually having the capacity to do so.
And then there's the guilt that you feel, because you feel like you're not connecting with your newborn, and we put all that guilt on ourselves because we feel like we're not meeting expectations. Yeah, that's a tough cycle to be in.
Yeah, so I'm curious about how you got yourself out. Like, was it through the writing? Was it through just expressing yourself and having insights around that for yourself? What was it that over a period of time allowed you to move through it?
I did end up going to the doctor and asking for some treatment. Actually, I've written about this, but I went to my gynecologist, or my OB, for my follow-up, and I said, I think I might be struggling here. And the doctor said to me, I don't know what you're looking for. I'm not a psychologist, which every time I tell the story, I get infuriated all over again. That was a setback that took me a little while to recover from, but I had people in my life that were pushing me towards getting help, thank God. So I did end up finding a doctor and getting on some meds and really going through therapy and all of that stuff, which I think is super important in postpartum depression treatment, and there's no shame in any of that. But then, funnily enough, after that is when I started writing. It's also when I became certified to be a yoga teacher. I started really saying, okay, what do I want out of this life? Like, what is going to keep me healthy and whole and able to parent these babies in a way that is authentic, And I really took time and said, I'm gonna pursue these things that make me feel healed and authentic and whole. Even though it's hard, it's hard to take the time. It's hard to make the commitment. It's hard to justify, but I'm going to do it. And writing was part of that. It was a big part of that.
So what I really hear is that you just made it a priority. So often we can get caught up in thinking that we don't have the time. But actually, if we don't make it a priority, if it's not something that we go, yep, this is really important to me, it just doesn't get done.
Right.
And what I love about what you're saying is you put yourself first, and you really saw how important that was for you to be able to then be able to look after everybody else in your family.
Yeah. And I saw my two older children, when I had the baby, were old enough that they knew that I wasn't okay when I was struggling. And so I thought them seeing me pursue pursuing being okay, choosing these healthy things to do, even if it involves me being taken away from the house a little bit more than normal. It's important that they see that, it's important that they see me doing healthy stuff for myself, because then I'm in a healthy place to parent them. So I don't see, I think a lot of times we think that these choices are selfish, but I don't think that they are. I think that we're making the best choice to be the best parent that we can be.
Yeah, I don't know where along the lines we decided that actually being a really great mum was to spend as much time with our children as possible and not look after ourselves. Like that really makes no sense to me. And maybe at some point it did, but it doesn't now. And I totally get how our past generation, right, for some reason or another, was like selflessness to your children is not looking after yourself and basically spending all your time with them, and regardless of how you're feeling, as opposed to going, no, let me look after me first, because that's actually being able to look after everybody else.
And I question what sort of life lessons we are teaching our children with that approach to parenthood, because what happens to them when they're in the same situation? The thought of my daughters or even my sons, totally sacrificing everything in order to be home with their families, that doesn't give me a warm, fuzzy feeling either. I want them to continue to be vibrant, healthy human beings who love their families. I think it's possible to be both, which, you take a lot of slack for saying that on the internet, but I do think it's possible to be both.
So I'm curious about that. I'm curious about why would you get a lot of flack on the internet because of saying that? Like, what have you found?
Well, to be fair, for the most part, I have wonderful people who read what I write and interact with me, and we've built a community, and it is supportive, and I don't want to, most of the people are amazing, and they tell me their stories, and I tell them my stories, and it's a great, amazing experience, and I'm not complaining. But when you have pieces, and I've had a couple that go, sort of viral, which is such a silly word, but, they go beyond the realm of my normal little everyday writing world, you open yourself up, you open yourself up to all kinds, and I've gotten messages from all kinds. I've been called every name in the book. I've been threatened. There's something I think that really triggers certain people about women telling their stories, women owning themselves, women putting themselves out there in a way that says, I love my life, but hey, this is hard and it's okay for me to say that. That threatens some people.
Yeah. Oh, I so hear you. It seems like the conversation wants to go in this direction, so I'm just going to keep with it. I wrote a book called Goodbye, Mr. X years ago, about 5 years ago now, and it was a big hit, and it's been published in many different languages. Anyway, one of the things I started to do was to write a lot on the Huffington Post, and called Your Tango. At the time, I was sharing my story because there was infidelity involved, and I was the person that went ahead and did that. And I wanted to share my story because really what it was that I was wanting to do was to say, hey, all of those women that are out, it's okay. Like, yes, you make mistakes. Yes, we make mistakes. But if you're on your own and you're feeling really guilty and people are dissing you down, it's okay. I understand, and you're not on your own. So I was really writing it for them. Oh my goodness. Wow. Thousands of comments and pretty much all like, what a bitch, this, that, you're such a cunt. Seriously. But, one of the things that kept me going was to think, I'm sure there are women out there that are having a really hard time, that somehow, somewhere, this can really help them. And what was interesting about it was a few months later, I got an email from a lady that said, thank you so much for writing that article. It really helped me, and it really got me out of a big, big fix of guilt. And forth and so on. And I'm not saying
and that's what matters. That is what matters. To me, that's worth it. I can say that because I've recovered mostly from my PTSD that I had from what's happened. But and what an important topic to be bringing voice to, because there's so much taboo involved in that topic. It's not something that's talked about. So to be on the forefront talking about infidelity, especially as the person who committed it, it's powerful. It's huge, and it's threatening to people. It's threatening to people when people are powerful.
Very, and owning it. And I think this is the big thing around owning that story and being okay with it, and then going, okay, here we go.
But that gives people the freedom then to own it themselves, which is just, that's what it's all about. That's what storytelling is all about to me.
I love that. I've not seen that, but you're absolutely right. It's so true. Yeah, something that sort of came to mind was something that someone else had shared with me today, in fact, actually. And he said, you know, listening to one of the podcasts that I was on and talking about it, was like, the more real you are with people, the more they can hear you. And I thought that was very interesting. I'd not heard that before, where it's like, if you put your voice out there, but you do it in a way that is authentic and real to you, like there's no bullshit, there's no like tossing over it, or no, it's this or it's that, or you know, and it may well change, your opinions may well change and your thought may well change around it, but where it's coming from allows for people to really hear it. And that's, I think, where the transformation can really happen. Yeah.
And it's freeing. I mean, it's very freeing. I go to the grocery store, and I mean, not to insinuate that everybody I know reads my blog. I know that they don't, but a lot of people, you know, have come up to me, and it's like the bullshit is just out of the way. You know, I mean, I'll stand in the checkout aisle, and if somebody has read something and it resonated with them and they had something they want to say to me, they just come up to me and say it. You know, we don't have to get through the talking about the weather and, you know, like all of the inanities before we get to the meat, the stuff that I actually care about, the juicy stuff, you know, like we've already just crossed all that stuff out of the way because I said, hey, here's my soul. So feel free to give me yours. And those little moments, I mean, they're just everything.
Yeah, there's a sense of real deep connection to themselves, to your story, to life, because they see themselves in your story. And that's really beautiful. So one of the questions that comes to mind as I'm hearing you speak was, what are some of the insights that you've had around motherhood, because I mean, it's amazing, Liz, that you blog and that you're working and that you have 3 kids and
well, now I have 4.
And now you have 4. Like, wow, okay.
But no, I mean, it's not amazing. It's just, I always say that I'm doing a lot of things, but I'm doing none of them well. So, I mean, I think I could probably drop 75% of the things that I'm trying to accomplish and do one of the things really well. But what's the fun in that? I'm just going to continue to do 500 things kind of mediocre, maybe.
I guess it's a personal choice, right?
But I mean, like I said before, and storytelling is my thing, you know, and I don't think that it needs to be everybody's thing, but I think that people need to find their thing that keeps them alive and vibrant and connected and healthy. I mean, you know, for some people that's writing, for some people that's exercising, you know, for some people it's dance, food, or cooking, or I don't know, I mean, it could be anything. But I do think that people need to make time for that because it makes you alive in every other aspect of your life. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I am a better mother because I'm able to write, because I make time to write. It makes me a better mother. And now that my children are getting older, my older two especially, it helps me talk to them because I'm connected. You know, people tell me stories. I'm connected to people who blog about having older children, you know, who have gone before me. So I read their stories, and I feel like I'm more prepared and more connected to my kids. So it doesn't need to be like I'm making time to write and I'm taking it away from my family. It's all kind of the same thing. I think I'm not saying that in a way that makes sense, but you know, I'm the same person no matter what arena I'm standing in. I'm writing as a mother and I'm mothering as a writer, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it does. I think there's something to be said for letting that creative expression out, because otherwise it will just vent itself somewhere else, you know.
That is the thing that I am constantly telling people is find a way to let your story out. And it doesn't have to be words, you know. I mean, it could be sculpture. I don't know. I mean, it could be anything. But find a way to let that out, because that's where the transformation happens. You know, that's where the healing happens. I look at some of the words I wrote 4 years ago when I started, and I'm not there anymore. You know, I'm not that person. And that's because those words came out.
It's even like conversation. What I'm finding actually through these podcasts is the capacity to have these conversations, and you don't know where it's going to go. Like, you don't know where the writing's going to go. It just comes out. And what I find is there's an insight that shows up when you listen to someone and you hear them, really insightfully hear them, like you insightfully hear yourself as you write. Like, I imagine, you know, I write too, and one of the things I find is it just flows sometimes, and it's through that flow I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even know that.
Who am I?
Who am I? Who is writing this for me, actually?
Yeah.
So I, any form of expression, I see it as an opportunity to transform as you see it differently. Because I'm assuming that by looking back on your writing, you don't see it in the same way that you used to when you wrote it.
Oh God, no. I mean, and I feel connected to that person. I mean, that's what's kind of nice about having that, being able to go back and look, is I can say, oh yeah, well that's how I felt then. That's who I was then, and feel this connection with that instead of, just struggling to remember what I had for breakfast yesterday.
Yeah, I can relate to the latter. So I know that before we went on this podcast, you shared something about your mother, and I was curious to follow that line of questioning and share more about that. Because I know as moms, we have children, but be nice to talk about being a mum, but also having had the mum and what your experience of that has actually been.
My mother, growing up was fine. I mean, I didn't have this terrible childhood, and I have to be very careful to not present it like that. I had a beautiful childhood, but my mother was mentally ill and got progressively worse as we got older, and especially as my sister and I were adults and left the house. So she was also an addict, and our relationship was pretty strained for the last 10 years of her life. And then she took her own life 4 years ago, which is, I mean, if you're paying attention, right around when I started writing, which is no coincidence. I mean, that was the outlet for that, and that was partially by design, because when you live with somebody who is mentally ill and an addict, or you love somebody, a lot of times, and in our situation, it was a secret. We weren't allowed to talk about any of that stuff. It would have hurt my mom's feelings terribly had I, gone around saying stuff like that, had I been open with anybody about how hard our lives were, how hard her life was. And I've said a couple times, and I truly believe she died of a disease of silence. If she had been able to own her story and talk about her story, if she had grown up in a different time when that was more encouraged, I don't think we would have ended up in the same situation. So part of the reason I believe wholeheartedly in being honest and speaking our truths is because she didn't get to.
Wow. I'm feeling quite emotional right now. It doesn't usually happen.
I'm sorry, it's heavy. It is heavy. It's some heavy stuff. I've had a lot of practice in carrying it around, but you haven't. So sorry to put it on you.
No, not at all. There's a real sense of compassion and the disease of silence. I'd never really heard that before, and I can really understand what you're saying in that.
We stood in the receiving line, my sister and I, at the funeral, and every single person came through and said, I had no idea. She was so beautiful. She was so put together. She was so perfect. Just over and over and over again. And at what cost? I mean, that's the question, at what cost? Yeah, she was beautiful and had a high, powerful job, and the house looked amazing, and she drove the right car and wore the right clothes, and, but she was miserable. And it's funny because, I can say that now. It's been 4.5 years since she died. But at first, when I first started writing, I was angry, I was numb, I was a lot of other things that all came out. So that, when I say that I've seen this evolution in the things that I've said, that's a big part of it. It took me a long time to come to a place of just genuine compassion and empathy for her and grief. But that took time. At first I just wanted to burst out of this bubble and scream, hey, we weren't okay. This wasn't okay, just so you know. All you people who thought we were okay, we were not okay. But then amazingly, just like I said in the grocery store, as soon as I said, hey, my mom was not all right and she took her own life, people started coming up to me and saying, me too. My brother, my mother, my father, my husband, my wife, whatever, somebody I love. Our situation is the same. And it's another one of those things that people just really don't talk about, but it's there. And I think we should talk about it.
Yeah, especially because of this disease of silence. And not, there are certain taboos around certain things like death or addiction or sex, infidelity,
right?
Which are actually, it's interesting, right? So it's not the thing itself, it's the stories around the thing. It's the beliefs and the constructs we've made up about those very things that stop us from being able to talk about them. not the thing itself.
Right.
What people would say, how they would react, the fear of being rejected, I guess. When I was a teenager, I had many suicidal episodes, a lot of suicidal thinking, and I felt very alone. I didn't really know who to go to, and I would douse myself in alcohol, and
Yeah.
a lot of suicidal thinking that would happen, but I didn't go out and do it until I was in my 20s when I actually took action. It didn't work, obviously, and I'm still here today, but it was a very lonely place. I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand why I felt the way I did. And I felt like I had no one to talk to because nobody really understood. Everybody else around me seemed like they had it totally together. In that moment, if there'd been someone to talk to, or at least that would have said me too, I can really see how that would have helped a lot in terms of having a connection, in terms of being understood, in terms of all of the things that we're all yearning for in some way, shape or form, I guess, which is to be understood, to be recognized, to actually be loved, everything.
Yep.
We are the good, the bad and the ugly, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But being able to share that almost breaks through this fear of rejection.
I'm a suicide survivor myself. I attempted suicide when I was 18. And, you know, a lot of people, I think that people who choose that, who go down that path, do so because the emotion is so overwhelming, you know, whether it's anger or sadness or depression. And I almost think it's the opposite. It's this numbness that comes from that sense of isolation. It's this idea that you're inconsequential. Nobody understands, nobody's connected to you, and nobody's going to care if you're there or not. You know, it's like emotional apathy. And that, I think, is the danger of this disease of loneliness, of not speaking up and connecting, of letting yourself, but that implies, you know, that it's somebody's fault, but staying alone in the dark. Because the dark lies. It tells you that there's nobody that cares.
Yeah, and nobody understands. I mean, I already, you know, had anorexia as well, and that was also...
Oh, girl, me too. We're like soulmates. We're like hot mess.
No wonder I gravitated towards you, not even knowing that was the case. Yeah. But it's amazing because actually the more people I speak to, the more they've gone through that too. So it's not like, it's quite usual actually. But as you say, like if nobody's talking about it, it seems bloody unusual. And you feel like the other one out. But everybody's going, somehow got some sort of picture of that in some sort of shape or form, but nobody's talking about it. So it's this vicious circle. But to give it a voice, you know, as you're saying, it's just give it a voice, and to have you and me, you know, for example, talk about it in a very kind of normal way. And I'm not wanting to belittle it, just saying that it's possible to actually move through it and come out of it the other end and still be here and be fully self-expressed, because actually this is what we're really talking about, is to be fully self-expressed. But I guess coming back to what we were saying, you know, before, like sort of what came to mind was what would happen, you know, if somebody is going through a really tough time, a dark time, something that's really full on, but they're so fearful of the rejection and that they won't be loved if they just stepped up and started sharing. What would you say to that? Like, I know we've touched on it a little bit here with regards to just write for the people that you want to write for and don't worry about the rest. But is there anything else? You know, speaking our truth, it seems to be easier said than done, because there's a lot of sense of like, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to be a nuisance.
Oh my God, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. It's still terrifying every single time I hit publish. But I said this recently to somebody who because like I said, I'm always trying to encourage people to write, and everybody's always like, shut up, Liz, stop saying that to me. So I said to one of my girlfriends the other day, we were talking about this, and I said, yeah, you know, I've been called every name in the book. I've gotten, you know, terrible, threatening, hate-filled messages at every avenue. People will read something like you said on the Huffington Post and go through the trouble of finding my personal email, which takes some digging, and send me an email about what a terrible human being I am. But that was never in response. Any of the stuff that I shared, that was the big stuff. You know what I mean? Like when I say, hey, parenting is hard, people are like, shut up, you stupid bitch. But when I say, listen, I'm a survivor. I tried to kill myself when I was 18 and I'm still standing here. I have never, ever had anybody say anything negative to me when I said something deep soul sharing like that. And I mean, I've said a lot. I have a lot of those kind of stories to tell, and I've told a lot of them, and I've never had anything but positive feedback. Here's my story, or here's my support, or, I think it's incredible that you're doing this. And I don't do it because I need that validation. But what I'm saying is, I think your community is there. That's what I think. And people aren't going to come after you for owning your story and standing up and telling it. They'll come after you for saying, I haven't slept through the night in 10 years and I'm tired because my kids wake me up and they say, well, what the hell, what did you expect? Why'd you have children? Shut your legs, you dumb whore. But they don't come after me for the real stuff. And I can take it on the other end. I don't, who cares about that?
Yeah, I'd not seen it in that way. And yeah, there's something to be said for that really touching somebody's heart, touching somebody's soul, touching that sort of place of real compassion. But also there's something else, which is that if our feelings are created through our thinking, and we're not responsible for anybody else's reality other than their own, then it would suggest that regardless of what people think or say, the important thing is here for you to liberate yourself regardless of what the other person thinks of you.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. And, at my deepest, darkest bottom as a writer, when I first started writing, when I was coming out of postpartum depression, and then shortly thereafter when my mother died, and I was just totally broken, I didn't even have any readers. I wasn't writing so that people could say, yeah, you're amazing, keep going. I was writing so that the words could go somewhere. It was writing in an attempt to try to figure out how I felt and what it meant, and where to go. And in the end, I think that's what matters. I mean, I love community that I've built, and I think we're pretty amazing, but I'd do it if there was no one there.
Oh, I really heard that. Yeah, I really heard that. And what I heard is, I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing it for anybody else. I'm doing this to liberate myself. I'm doing this to free me up so that I can live more of this aliveness and this joy that is existent in me, regardless of what I'm thinking about myself.
Which I think ends up being a gift to the world anyways. Not just me, but anybody, because then it makes me a better whatever, a better wife, a better mother, a better friend, a better sister. You know what I mean? If I can work on healing myself, then I can be more available to help the people that I care about. So yes, I agree with you that yes, I'm doing it for me, and we should all be doing these things for ourselves. But in the end, you're doing it for yourself so that you can give back. I think that's just a cycle, because that's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, thank you for the add-on. Because also when I was hearing you speak, I was like, actually, if we create more space inside of ourselves, there's our capacity to be able to truly listen to others, yeah, which is an opportunity for them to create space inside of themselves. And so it goes on.
That's how the world changes. Yeah. And it's exponential. I mean, really, I do think that's how the world changes. And I can love you better if my heart's not shattered. You know what I mean? I can be better for you if I'm patched up together. And then you can patch up together, and then you can go help other people. I mean, it sounds very hokey and idealistic. I know that. But I've lived in this world for years now, and I think it's happening. I see more and more people every day, standing up and saying, here's my story. And more people standing up and cheering for them as they tell it. I do think this is how we change the world.
I mean, I certainly seen it in my work, which is, working with women to help them live a more joyful and alive life. And I've certainly seen it that, once they're impacted, that they go off and impact others, and they go off and impact others, and they go off and impact others. And it just ripple effects, the ripple.
And God, who better to fix the world than the mothers? I mean, we knew it was going to be the mothers anyways, right?
And for any blokes that are listening to this, don't worry, you're also cool.
I mean, we love you too. But,
So yeah, you're doing a great job. But yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to me. I don't know if this happened to you, but I didn't realize how much bullshit I was carrying until I had my son.
Oh.
Like, honestly, I'd done a lot of work on myself. I'd been in this industry for like 14 years. I'd seen a lot. I've done all the seminars, blah, blah, blah. I thought, wow, I'm pretty good, And then I had my son, and I'm like, no.
And then the universe is like,
yeah,
right.
really? Yeah, I don't think so. I think we're gonna give you some shit. Yeah, and it's just been this huge journey of, wow, I did not know that I had that behavior inside of, wow, I did not know that I thought that. Oh my God, I didn't know that I was that mean or that nasty or that impatient or that hokey. I did not know that. Like I see these behaviors and I'm like, wow, they would not have been there. Like I would not have known that if I hadn't had my son. And
what a whole new capacity for healing, though, really. I mean, it's like you stripped away all these layers, I don't think I've told anyone this, but my husband and I have this thing that we say, like, everybody is carrying around a bag full of shit, I mean, especially as we get older and people have had all these life experiences, like, some people's bag might be more full than somebody else's, or somebody's might be more fragrant than somebody else's or something, but we're all carrying our shit, I mean, we're all trudging through this experience, carrying our shit. And whatever we can do to make that load lighter, God, why wouldn't we do it?
Have kids and unload it.
The first time I screamed at my kids, and now I'm on record as saying, yes, I scream at my kids sometimes. It does happen. But the first time I did it, I couldn't talk afterwards because my voice had never done that in my life prior to having children, because I was never a yeller. Having children made me a yeller, I was using parts of my body I'd never used before, apparently. My vocal cords. Yeah, I mean, it changes you. It makes you do things you don't even recognize.
No, right? And it was interesting. I think I've shared the story before, but it feels pertinent to share it again, which is I used to really dread my son coming home. And I know for any mother that's listening to this, be like, oh my God, how awful. Yeah, no, I used to. And it was getting in the way of me being able to just enjoy my relationship with him. It's not like I was doing it on purpose. It was just this dread that would fill up. And I'd be like, oh my God, what am I going to do with my son when he gets home? How am I going to entertain him? Anyway, so I would find anything else to do aside from just being with him. So I'd go into the kitchen, I'd start making dinner, or I would just do anything other than be with him. And I was finding this really, really difficult because I was like, I really want to connect with my son, but I'm finding it really hard to do so. And I remember going to the park that day and suddenly just hearing this voice inside of me that just said, it's okay. The way you feel was the way your mother felt. You don't need to. And I was like,
now I'm getting emotional.
I did not know that.
You said any mothers listening to this would be like, oh my God, how horrible. And I do not agree with that statement. I think any mothers listening to that would say, yeah, girl, I get you. I feel that sometimes. I mean, yeah, who doesn't feel that sometimes? That's the struggle. I mean, when I was researching your podcast, and I was thinking about, joy and what joy as a mother is. And it's not this idea, I don't think anyways, of like, Donna Reed in an apron smiling all the time because everything is wonderful and we love vacuuming and we love, preparing dinner. It's those moments. It's moments, like life is, it's a series of beautiful moments interrupted by, a whole lot of crap all the time.
Yeah.
And so, your kid comes home from school and of course you're excited to see your child and you love your child, but it's also okay to say, okay, here we go. I have to do this now.
Yeah, it is.
And I think that's it. That's like the duality of motherhood right there. That's the joy and the pain all mixed up together. It's a perfect example. That's us working through our shit.
Yeah. And to know that the behaviors that have come around didn't belong to me. That was really cool to see. They didn't belong to me, and then I could drop them. That was also very cool to see, and to know that my any kind of weird behavior that I have, that it's actually innocent, that it's not ever going to be intentional. Like I don't know about you, Liz, but I don't intentionally go out and get angry at my son or intentionally become. It just shows up in an energy, and I'm like, whoa, okay. Here we go. It's not something that is intentional per se. It just comes and you're like, oh, okay, that was interesting. But it's an opportunity for us to get curious about it, right? And to have more compassion towards ourselves in some way, shape or form. I don't know.
And then therefore more compassion towards other people. You know, I mean, it's easy to be in the grocery store and see a mother screaming at her kids and go, oh my God, you know, what's wrong with her? What's she doing wrong? Then you can see yourself in it if you look at it a different way. You know, I mean, who hasn't been there? Who hasn't been in a situation where, you know, they've been the person that's being judged by other people? If you can find compassion for yourself, I think theretofore you can find compassion for other people. And then again, we're back to, you know, creating this better world where we're all a little bit less likely to judge each other for the stuff that shows up.
Yeah, there's more love and understanding. I think that that's the really key thing here, which is, just more love and understanding for ourselves and for others. Yeah. So Liz, my love, what are you giving yourself permission to do more of these days? Like, in terms of, I asked this question, you know where this question comes from? It came from a place of, like, often we stop ourselves from doing the very things that we want to do with our life, because it's almost like I don't give myself permission to do that yet. And especially as women, right? I think.
Oh my God, yeah.
So I'm curious, like, what are you giving yourself
permission? Well, it's funny that you should ask. I just came from a writing conference, which I wasn't going to go to. And then at the last minute, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this because something in me was calling out that I needed it. And I structured, I mean, they had all these sessions like on, you know, how to do Pinterest and whatever. And I was like, well, that's all great and fine, but I need the inspirational crap over here. So I structured all my sessions so that I went to the, you know, like the pep talks. Like it was basically like a 72-hour pep talk with an open bar, which is like what heaven would be like if you ask me. And I came back from that like so refreshed and energized and ready to throw myself into some of the stuff that, just like you said, I've been holding myself back just a little bit from. You know? And I think that's what we do. We say, yeah, I'd love to write my book. I'd love to write for other sites and freelance, but I'm going to grow really slow because that's what's safe and that's what feels comfortable to me. I'm going to write just a little bit because that feels safe and comfortable to me. I'm going to tell that story, but I'm going to maybe leave out a couple of those details that make me look like a total a-hole because that feels safe and comfortable to me. You know what I mean? And so I'm kind of like, well, what if I just threw myself all in? Let's see what happens.
What does that look like?
It looks like totally feeling vulnerable and naked. You know, like that dream where you show up at high school and you have no clothes on? It's like that, except all the time.
You know, I was going to say, you're going to take your clothes off.
Yeah, and I don't have my high school body anymore, so it's worse.
I'm sure it's beautiful. It's just, you know, different. You've had 4 kids, and I think you need to give yourself a break. So Liz, my love.
That's kind of what all these, you know, all these people who stood up and spoke, who I stole my inspiration from, they were like, so what? So what if you feel vulnerable and exposed? I mean, just feel vulnerable and exposed then. And that's like, it's kind of like what you were saying about how you realize that these behaviors are coming out of you. And as soon as you realize that it's involuntary, you know, that it's innocent, like you said, which is such a beautiful word for it, then you can just go, okay, I mean, this is what I'm feeling right now. And that's okay. And as soon as you do that, you've kind of given yourself some freedom to move through it. Same as with the anger, I think, when you're yelling at your kid, not you personally, but, you know, the collective you, when we're yelling at our children in the grocery store, as soon as you go, oh my God, what am I doing? Then you can kind of just go, all right, I'm going to move through this.
Yeah, because beating ourselves up about the fact that we've just done that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't actually, you know, and even if we, you know, and even if we do it, it's okay. But there is no sense in doing that and then beating ourselves up about it for months on end to kind of go, oh yeah, like, it just happened and it's okay. It's okay. It's okay to be human. Okay.
It's okay. I want that tattooed on my forehead. It's okay.
So Liz, if someone wants to read your blog and say, me too, where can they find you?
So it's just my name, LizPetrone.com, which is Petrone, not like the tequila, unfortunately. So it's LizPetrone, LizPetrone.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Liz, for being on the show today.
Thank you.
I so enjoyed this conversation.
I know, I could definitely keep going for a long time.
Oh God, me too. We're going to have to do it offline, or part 2, part 3. Part 4. Every year we'll have it's a Liz Petrone Marina show. Yay!
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being on the show today. It was wonderful to hear. I mean, just what a beautiful way to talk about, you know, self-expression and to do it in your way, because I guess it's, you know,
Thank
we've all
you.
got ways of doing it. So, and for those of you that've been listening, hopefully you got as much out of it as we both did, actually. Till the next time, bye for now. And there we have it, another amazing episode of The Joy of Being, to accompany you during this crazy time of year. Remember, you're not on your own, you can reach out, and you're okay no matter what. If you are tired of the insanity and the juggle that summer brings, remember to get in touch for your free instant mum relief accelerator call worth £500 at bit.ly/instant mum relief. That's bit.ly/instant mum relief, and book your calls there. So until next week's episode, remember, you are the joy you seek.